So my name is Lee Townsend, and I'm an engagement consultant for the charity Off the Record. And my role simply involves engaging the community, speaking to people from diverse parts of our society, and ensuring that they're aware of Off the Record and the stuff that we do to support people in terms of their well-being and helping them to feel positive about themselves. I've got the pleasure of hosting this podcast this evening, and I'm going to ask each of our guests to introduce themselves and tell us exactly what they do.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Wale. I'm a GP, a good friend of Lee's. I've known him for a long time and I'm happy to be here.
I'm Chantel, I'm a counsellor at Off the Record. I do outreach work, which means I go into the community and meet young people where they are. And I also am part of a small team which supports young people affected by youth violence in Croydon.
And then we have the resident barber, O'Neill.
Hi, I'm O'Neill Mackenzie. I'm a barber in South London and I deal with all race.
When you say all race, what do you mean? You cut everyone's hair?
I cut everybody's hair, from children to adults to OAPs.
Can you do a perm?
Of course.
Wow.
I'll do anything you want me to do.
That's not barber then, that's hairdresser, bro. So we've got Chris, the resident hairdresser. Okay, cool. So we're going to be talking about a number of different topics tonight, and as we all know, the coronavirus has had a serious impact on our communities, on the way we live, the way we conduct ourselves, the amount of distance that we try to have from each other. So we're going to just sort of explore what our individual experiences are with the coronavirus and the conversations that we've had with our clients and the people that we work with in the areas that we operate. So I'm going to ask each of you, could you tell us a little bit first of all, as we get into that, what's your client base? What does your client base look like? If you can just describe your client base for us.
My client base varies from babies to OAPs, adults, children, sometimes women, mum, dads. It doesn't really matter. I trim everybody and anybody.
Do you know what was kind of strange? Well, not even strange, but what was quite unique for us? So as a counselling charity, initially we didn't really necessarily operate within the barbershop space until we met people like yourself and Qatar and Jan, whose barbershop we're using today. And we found it so unique that within, especially the black community, the African and Caribbean community, that one barber could actually be cutting 5 or 6 generations of the same family. Is that true to your experience?
Yes, oh yes. I've started from 2-year-old, right back now they're 16, 17. Some of them is 26. I'm old, but I look young still, you understand? But yeah, man, from father to son, growing up till now they're fathers themselves, you understand? Beautiful, beautiful.
And there's another part to this question that I just want to add on to it. Like, where do you operate? Is it strictly from the barbershop, and how does your barbershop operate? Because I know that since COVID, there's been a lot of transition within the black community in terms of how barbershops are run. So now a lot of them are operating now with booking systems, which is more something that you see more in a European type barbershop. Is that how your shop works? And is it that you just cut in the space, which is the shop, or are you taking private clients elsewhere?
No, we used to do private clients, but now we do more in the shop, more of a booking system, but we're also taking walk-ins as well.
Chantal, do you want to tell us about your customer base and how you operate in terms of your service, please?
Yeah, so before COVID, Off the Record did mostly face-to-face work. They do have the online service, but of course when COVID came, we couldn't work face-to-face. So we shut down and then we worked entirely from home. So all face-to-face appointments then became predominantly telephone appointments, which was a brand new way of working for all of us as counsellors who are really used to working face-to-face with someone, being able to look at the physical sort of responses to things, see if someone sort of changes their stance and sort of looks a bit uncomfortable. All the visual cues we didn't have anymore. So for myself, it was a brand new way of working because I had to really try and get in tune with their voice and try and listen to the subtle changes, the pauses, if I can sort of pick up if there's sort of some emotions coming through. One thing I found was, unfortunately, our specific target group, young, especially young black boys, were even harder to reach than they already are. And where we at Off the Record would really rely on our relationships with people in the community they themselves were firefighting it within their organisations, trying to keep afloat. So partnership work and sort of working together really sort of went on the back burner. So that was really difficult. We also introduced Zoom calls, although a lot of young people would prefer not to go on Zoom as well. So, you know, it was really difficult, but we were able to translate our offer in different ways. So we did the No Trim Challenge, where we encouraged young people to show off their no trim looks versus sort of their sort of before and after, where they look like they've blown up, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And we were able to do things like that, which were quite special. Now that we're back, Off the Record has continued the telephone offers and the Zoom offers. So in a way, Off the Record, I feel, has really grown from COVID, because we've been able to widen our offer. While we already had the online offer, now we can offer Zoom and telephone, face-to-face. And actually, where I'm an outreach worker, I'm able to get back into the community now and work with young people where they are in the community.
What really made me feel proud, I mean, obviously I worked for Off the Record before I went on to the other charity that I work with now, and I came back in March as a consultant, and really a proud moment and a heart-feeling experience for me. But what touched me is when we had a staff retreat a couple of weeks ago, and I heard the conversations about our online service and how people can access that, and how that's helped us to reduce numbers so much for people who are waiting 6 months, 7 months for counselling, but we're now able to access it almost immediately. And that was really, really heartening to see that happening, because there's such a great need. But one of the things I'd asked previously when I started the question initially was, what does your client group look like? And I know you said you work with the BAME, you work with services targeting specifically people from the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. But a lot of the people probably listening to the podcast might assume that counselling is something for white people. Not even just white people, but white middle class people. Like, if you're up there, then you'll access counselling. Is that true, or is that a fallacy about the people accessing the services that Off the Record?
Yeah, interestingly, the online service at Off the Record sees a more diverse group of young people accessing it rather than the face-to-face services, which I think is really interesting and something to think about. But actually, in the Croydon service, we do see a lot of minority ethnic groups coming in the door, which is great. I think that's really great to see.
And I think with the online service, you can be far more inconspicuous, so no one needs to know that you're accessing it. You can protect your identity, because let's face it, I mean, in African, Caribbean, Asian and certain other ethnic groups, counselling is taboo. Mm-hmm. You know, when you start mentioning mental health, it's like, whoa. I'll never forget when I got diagnosed with ADHD by a psychiatrist. The first thing my mother said, and she's 42 years my senior, was, Lord God, your life finish. So for those of you who don't understand patois, which is the Jamaican dialect, Lord God, your life finish means your life is over. You need help from God, because, you know, it's gone bad. Lo and behold, when she heard I was on medication, it was like, oh, my poor child, you know. But I can imagine the attempts to try and avoid the shame and the labeling and all the rest of it. So with the online counselling, which I think is revolutionary and is really a dynamic way to go, has really helped a lot of people to get support that they wouldn't have accessed in any other shape or form. And I'm proud to be part of an organisation that had the foresight to kind of carry that forward and keep it going, you know. So that's really amazing, and kudos to Off the Record for the work that they're doing across Croydon, Merton and the London Borough of Sutton as well. Doc,
Yeah.
tell us about your client group and how you operate, because I'm assuming that you're just in a fixed office, but enlighten us, man.
Yeah, so I'm a GP. I work in Croydon, primarily Thornton Heath and West Croydon. But yeah, so my demographic is very diverse, young, old, all ages, all sexes. The demographic of Croydon is quite highly densely populated with ethnic minorities. So the majority of my client base are, you know, black or ethnic minorities. And pre-COVID, it was what you'd call your conventional GP service. You know, you just made a face-to-face appointment, everybody came in. But then as things evolved and, you know, the threat became clear and we got guidance from Public Health England, we moved to telephone consultations or video consultations because for some people it's just useful, but we are seeing more face-to-face and walk-in appointments now than we were during the pandemic. And yeah, COVID's been massive. I mean, it's difficult, you know, to articulate what it's done to everyone across the world in, you know, a few sentences. But I think here, especially in the South London population, of course, there was a lot of morbidity, you know, a lot of people died, and a lot of people are facing the consequences of either family members that have been bereaved, breadwinners, people suffering with long COVID, the effects of, you know, the anxiety that was caused by the condition. It's propagated a lot of fear within society now, and a lot of people are very worried about a lot of different things. So, yeah, we have felt the brunt of COVID and its burden, and we are seeing, you know, maybe more pathology in some areas that we wouldn't have seen pre-COVID, especially, you know, people with mental health issues that arose as a result of the isolation, especially that came from it. So, yeah, it's been a challenging 2 years, but yeah, I'm here for it, you know, we're there on the front line as you are with Off the Record and the Barbers. We're all a big community, aren't we, trying to help each other through it. But yeah, it's been challenging, and yeah, it continues to be tough.
Do you know what? I don't know what our listenership for this podcast is going to be, so we're hoping and we're aiming it at people who are 18 plus. But I like to keep things simple. So when you're using these big terms like pathology, can you say it again for me? Say that word again.
Fair. You know what? I've been in the game too long. Yeah. So
what's the word? What's the word?
Pathology. But
pathology
is true.
What does pathology mean, doctor?
It just means disease. It just means disease. Yeah.
My vocabulary is growing as time progresses. But you know what? For anyone who's listening, don't feel ashamed to ask people when they say a word that you don't understand. I've got dyslexia, dyspraxia, and ADD. I'm fully loaded with learning difficulties over here, you know. And if you don't ask, you don't get. So if I hear any more big words, I'm going to just shout it out and try and get an explanation for it, because we're dealing with people of high intellect all around the room. Why do you guys think that the barbershop is an important space for our community?
As soon as you said that, I just sort of instinctually volunteered. So with you, Lee, I've done some work in barbershops, and just being a present in the shops and a spectator, if you like, I was so struck by just and no one knows it really, but the mental health conversations that are happening, and that so unconsciously, organic. Very organically. And you know, I was sitting there and I'm thinking about one specific experience, just listening, and in one sitting, one of the barbers got a phone call that one of his friends had committed suicide, and that opened up a conversation about suicide and mental health. They were talking about religion, which can bring up all sort of mental health struggles, you know, and conflicts. They were talking about their beliefs in aliens, and you know, it's so broad. So many more things as well. Those are just the things that I remember. And they don't even realise what's actually going on, the special conversations that they're having. And I was just thinking, wow, this is where really important work can take place. Because these barbers are sitting here cutting hair, you know, that's the main thing, but they're having mental health conversations without realising it. They definitely have access to people in the community that mental health professionals don't, because everyone's going to go get their hair cut, and they probably trust you naturally.
Yeah, they
much
speak more.
Exactly.
They open up more to us than
I can imagine.
Dr. Wale, I know you've had a lot of involvement with the BAME Barbers Network. You're the resident GP who's a part of the WhatsApp group where doctors can post questions that they've got about concerns about health issues and stuff, and you respond within 24 hours, and you've been just amazing in providing that support of your own time, volunteering, and I just want to hear your insight as to how you feel the relevance of a barbershop space in the community.
in general practice, as a family doctor, really what we want is to build a relationship with our patients that's continuous over a period of time, so they feel comfortable enough to come and share, you know, their problems with us, which doesn't always happen because of different reasons. But the barbershop has parallels in the sense that you build a personal relationship with your barber. They get to know personal things about your day-to-day life. The conversations that you'll hear in there will often be relevant to what's going on in your life. So it's very important in that sense, because what helps the community grow is sharing knowledge, you know, and also burdens. And I was fortunate enough to work with you, obviously, Lee, in the barbershop project that we did some years ago, where we tried to use those contacts as a way of increasing awareness about mental health, prostate health, diabetes, things that are very prevalent within our community here. And so, yeah, the barber's very important. Very important. And even in an increasingly isolated society, for some people, it may be the only point once every 2 to 4 weeks or weekly where they're actually sitting and talking with other people and sharing a lot of these things. So I think it's hugely important.
You know what's a shocker for me is that that we've managed over the last, 3-4 years to continue to sustain that project, and it's still running to the extent where we've been running these events that have the same exact name as the podcast, Trim Grin. We've been providing free haircuts in the community to students across Croydon and the boroughs of Merton. And what I'm so proud of is that we're now 2 weeks into a 5-week training program, an introductory to barbering, at a pupil referral unit with one of the barbers of the BAME Barbers network. Has been going in on a weekly basis. This is the second week this week, along with a mental health support worker or counsellor from Off the Record, who's just been using that space to engage with the students and signposting where applicable to the various services. So we're seeing where we've bore so much fruit from that trial project, and I think there's so much more of a journey where we can take it, you know. And for me, I think when I think about the barbershop space, it really is a nucleus for disseminating information across the community, which is part of the reason why we're having this discussion now around COVID vaccination and the importance of it, and the boost jabs and all the rest of it. But also, one of the things that I've seen that has been so important is the barbershop's a place of entertainment. You go in there and there's banter, there's conversations, depending on which barbershop you're in there. If you go up on, what's that road up there called? The main road, South Norwood High Street, there's a pool table in there. Some barbershops that have a ludi board or dominoes playing or drafts or whatever it may be. Some they might have a little bit of alcohol, which we're not endorsing, but it happens, you know. And it's just such a nice extension of the family. Look good, feel better, you know. I go to the barber, even though I don't have much hair on my head, once a week. And if I skip a week, I don't feel good. In fact, my relationship with my barber is so deep that I pay for my haircuts in advance each month. So as I get paid, I pay for next month's haircuts. And I'm there and whether I go or not, he still gets paid. You know, and that's just the nature of that bond that I have and that loyalty, because I would not go to, Anil cuts in the same barbershop that I belong to, but he's probably cut my hair once or twice in his life. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to make a habit of it either. Not that you're not good.
All right. No, I'm getting a head now.
But on a serious note, how do you see your space? Because you're the man, man. You know,
it's like going to your brethren's house, man. You understand? Where you can just chill, be yourself, say anything you want to say, talk whatever you want to talk, bring up any conversation, and you will get another person's point of view on it. You understand? It's great. I feel like sometimes I'm a counsellor, but I'm not a counsellor. You understand? I feel like sometimes I'm a doctor, but I'm not a doctor. But I can only give advice on what I've been through, or next person's gonna give advice on what they've been through.
Or share the guidance that the doctor's passed on
That's
to you
it.
through the WhatsApp group.
That's it. You understand? But it's a place where you can come and just chill out, have fun, say what you gotta say, regardless if they like it or not. You're free. Trust me, you can see some deep conversation inside of the barbershop. You never thought you would. You understand? You could say something and that person would say, raw. I'm going to try that, I'm going to do that just because of what you said or what you've been through. You understand? It's deep, man. It's deep. It's a very deep space, but it's a very caring space as well.
And that's why I think the title of our podcast and our project is so amazing, and it lines up so well. Trim and Grin. Do you know what I mean? You come in there, you hold that trim, you embrace the vibes that exist in there, and 9 out of 10 times you'll leave with a grin, just smiling off your face and shining your 32 if you've got them. It could be your dentures, but you know, we don't discriminate whether they're real or they're not. If you've been Turkey and got a job done, it's all right. You know what I mean? So obviously we're here to speak about coronavirus, COVID-19, the vaccination stuff, and we're not here to try and present any particular view, but we do want to ensure that people are presented with facts and can make their own decisions about whether they believe that vaccination is for them or whether they want to register and receive a booster jab, etc. So I just want to ask, what is the coronavirus? And I think there's no better place to start than with our medical professional in the place. No pressure.
No pressure.
But I know you got a textbook answer somewhere.
Yeah. Well, no, it's been around long enough, so I should be able to give a valid answer.
All right, let's go, man.
It's a virus, okay? And viruses are molecular organisms that consist of just DNA and protein, okay? They've been around since the start of time, and their mission in life is to live primarily on a host, okay? Now, the coronavirus, we think, emerged late 2019, around September it's estimated now, from Wuhan in China. Now, there are multiple coronaviruses, like I said, that have been around since the start of time. But what made this particular virus different from the ones that we've had for generations is the fact that it was an expert at moving from one host to another. And two, it did some stuff to your immune system that we've not seen normal viruses do, okay? So typically coronaviruses affect your respiratory tract, your lungs, okay? So that's why you get the cough, the runny nose, you know, possibly a headache, blocked sinuses. Yeah, barely. But what we found with this particular virus is, in addition to doing that, it also, I'm trying to put it in layman's terms, you know, it also makes your immune system so excited that certain parts of your body can shut down. And that's what made it very dangerous. The fact that, one, it could spread very quickly, and two, for certain groups of individuals, we found that it just triggered their immune system to a point that they could die, you know, which is unfortunately what happened to a lot of people. But yeah, so it's a virus, which is some DNA and protein. You can't see it with the naked eye, and it survives within a host. That's its mission in life. So outside of a host, it can't really exist for too long, although it can exist for up to, you know, 8 to 12 hours on some surfaces, depending on what they are. But generally, yeah, that's what it is in a nutshell.
You have people who says they've got it, and you have people who say they ain't got it. Some don't believe it's real. You understand? Some believe it's fake. It's just something to scare us. You understand? But you have to go through or know somebody who's been through that process to kind of understand what it's all about.
I always try and speak honestly, you know, regardless, and I always try and speak with an evidence base. And what I can say is, 100% it's a real virus, okay?
All right, Chantel, like, I know that during COVID we saw an increased intake and a number of people were taking up counselling and stuff. Were there any themes that came up around the coronavirus or vaccination that you can recall from the counselling practice?
I think uncertainty, not quite. I think just to echo what Wale was saying about information, because of course, you know, young people are always on the internet, always seeing all sorts of conspiracy theories and things like that. And I think the uncertainty, not knowing what to believe, what to believe and not to believe, And then, of course, their networks, so the elderly people, the vulnerable people around them. Can I go and see my grandparents? Am I putting my family at risk, my friends at risk? And I think there's then sort of the ripple effect. So even though it wasn't necessarily specifically about COVID, it's the missing out on these really important periods of their lives. You know, we have, you know, some young people who didn't actually do their GCSEs because of it. That's a really big point, you know, in my life, certainly. And I think that impacted some of their pathways. There's some people who never got to go to their own prom, and that's a major thing for young people, you know. So there's a real ripple effect. There's multiple themes. If we just sort of put COVID in the middle and just do a big spider diagram, it will go on for ages, because I think it just spills into every single area. And I think with our young people from minority communities, they were worried about their family, themselves, and separate it. You know, if they are not sure about what COVID, you know, do I believe it, do I not? How does that then separate me from my friends who are really, you know, pro-vaccination and really sort of passionate? Because there was a lot of conflict, you know, people who didn't want to, I wouldn't want to sit with you if you been vaccinated, let's not sit in the same, you know, there was lots of that.
It's just amazing to see how vital it was and how great it was that as a service we could be there to fill that gap for young people who are seeking some sort of guidance along that pathway. If you think of it as a map or a journey, we showed them how to use the compass to find their own route, so to speak, and that's invaluable. And I know that there might be people listening now to even this podcast who are thinking, you know what, I'm struggling with some things, whether it is around COVID or the vaccination, but if you're between the ages of 11 to, what do we got up to now, 25, then obviously you can tap into Off the Record through our online counselling services, through the face-to-face, which does have a small amount of a waiting list, but it's worthwhile contacting us so you can get that information. What I found that a lot of people were asking when it came onto the vaccine was like, how does vaccination work? How does it fight against the coronavirus?
It tricks your body into thinking you have the disease that you're trying to protect it against, okay? So if someone gives you a vaccine, they're giving you, traditionally, a less potent version of that. So your body sees it, thinks, oh, he's got this, makes the antibodies, your own, you know, natural antibiotics to kill that thing.
That's the defense mechanism.
Correct. But the thing that's brilliant about the human body is whenever you encounter one of these viruses or bacteria, it has memory. So whatever sword it used to kill that particular microorganism, that will stay around in your bloodstream for about 10 years. Okay, so that's how vaccination, that's the principle of how it works. Now, there is an important point, because viruses we don't traditionally vaccinate people against because they mutate so quickly, okay? And the way a vaccine works is you're creating something that has the exact structure to kill that particular virus, okay? So because viruses mutate so quickly, we used to think there's no point, because by the time you create a vaccine that kills that particular one, it would have changed, okay? So the first, one of the first vaccines that was developed, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which we're not really using anymore, was a traditional vaccine in the sense that what they were injecting in people was the coronavirus, but a modified version, one that wouldn't give you the ill effects, but would trick your body into thinking you had it, so you produce these antibodies. But then what was unique to COVID is, for the first time in history, we used a different type of technology for vaccines, known as the mRNA vaccinations. Now, again, without getting too sciencey, I want to make it understandable, but what they're doing with the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines is they're giving you the genetic material necessary to produce the antibody, the kind of sword that will kill the virus, okay? The original reason for needing more than one jab is that every time you get that jab and you get that DNA to produce the antibodies, after a period of time, there's a drop-off in the amount of antibodies that your body would produce. So what was said, by the vaccine manufacturers and the public health officials was, in order to be fully protected, you need another one, okay, to make sure that those antibody levels, the level of the kind of swords you've got to kill the stuff, stays high enough. The third and fourth ones, or subsequent ones after that, that was also the reason, but also that they said they'd modified it slightly because, like I said, the virus had mutated slightly. And the same thing happens with the flu jab. For people that get their flu jab every year, what they're doing is you're being vaccinated against what they think is the most potent form of flu that year.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you. I really appreciate you being able to break it down and simplifying it so that people can kind of just digest that information quite easily. So Neil, can you tell us how, from your experience of being in the barbershop on the day-to-day, that people from the Black and Asian community, can you tell us what their feelings are, generally, it's a summary, are towards vaccination, based on your experience?
Based on what I've heard is nobody trusts it. They say they don't trust vaccination, but then it's a split. It's 50-50.
Okay.
You understand? Some say they're going to take it, they have to take it because they're around their parents, they're around their grandparents, and they don't want to infect them or harm them. You understand what I'm saying? But then you might get the odd one or two or three or four that says it's not real, or they don't believe in it. You understand?
Yeah.
So it's a split. Inside the shop is a split, but we all need it. You understand? If we're gonna go and see our parents who's older than we are, or our grandparents, then we have to protect the vulnerable.
Or even if you're around somebody who's got some kind of illness or disease that exposes them and makes their resistance a lot lower than what it could be.
Not as strong as that.
That makes absolute sense. It makes sense. And the challenge is real because at the end of the day, people fear what they don't know. And let's be real, this vaccination was created very quickly. There's a very quick turnaround around it, and I think that's what heightened the fears and the concerns that a lot of people had as it related to it. I don't know what your experience is, Chantal, in terms of what you've been hearing on the ground, being out and about in the community and also in the counselling room itself.
Yeah, absolutely the same. Do I put this in my body? And I think there's a real link to what you were talking about in terms of the relationship with between minority ethnic communities and healthcare and the historic just the history there. And I think it sort of makes sense if you look at it like that. Of course we'd expect distrust, we'd expect some pushback, we'd expect questioning. Is this going to benefit me? Is this to hurt me, to harm me? There's some real fear out there about, it feels like people have been at crossroads. If I put this in my body, am I going to live? Am I going to die, And that's a real scary thing, I think, for a lot of people.
It is. Yeah.
And who do I trust to guide me and give me the right information in order to make that decision for myself?
That trust is such a big point, man, because you know what? The reason why we've chosen to have the three of you here on this podcast is that we believe that all of you occupy a position of great trust within different elements of the community. My mum's in her 80s, mid-80s at that, and her view is whatever the doctor says goes. So you're God, demigod, not G-O, capital G, but demigod. And I think for some people, their therapist is someone who they see as a route to knowledge, information, and guidance. And in the same breath, there are some people who won't go through formal channels, but they see their barber as being that key pillar in their lives. I think a lot of people see their barber, whether they acknowledge it or not, as a father figure. What advice, or how do you as individuals in your professional practices as a barber, as a counsellor, as a general practitioner, how do you support people in making that decision? Should they get vaccinated or a booster jab, or should they not? How do you support that?
So my point of view, if you believe that you need it, or you believe that it will save your life, or your grandparents, or your mum, anybody, go for it.
And if you're not sure?
And if you're not sure, then speak to your GP, man. They have more information on it. They can advise you more about what it's about. You understand? Yeah, what the side effects is, what all the information is there.
Do you know what I get from you though, Neil, from listening to you speak, and I can understand why there's such a significant amount of trust within the customer and the barber, because you just sound so authentic. And I've been in the shop and I've seen the leaflets that you've got from attending the COVID vaccination training that you're sharing with customers, and also the conversations that we've been facilitating in the barbershop, where people have been able to enter a competition where they could win free haircuts for a month. And I really just applaud you for the professionalism with not trying to paint a view that you might hold or that certain prominent members of your customer base might hold, but rather just throwing out a blanket expose of information so that people can make an informed decision in and of themselves. And I think that's really applaudable.
I think the main message I want to get through to people about this is, one, it's not by force, okay? There's something in medicine, big word alert, called autonomy, okay? And that's important.
Break it down.
I'm going to break it down. That's not just important in medicine, but it's important in life and any free society, okay? All autonomy means is you have a right to decide what happens to your body, okay? But the only thing I always tell people is, before you believe any information that you're given, just question the source, and is that person qualified to give you that information? If you're in an at-risk group, and very broadly speaking, people that are morbidly obese, end-stage kidney failure, things like metabolic syndrome, I would urge you to get it for the purposes of saving your life, you know. And in answering one of your questions, Anil, that you brought up earlier, as in where's it gone, where's it disappeared, I think part of that is the success of the vaccination program, because what they were trying to achieve is, especially in the at-risk groups, is you might still get ill, but you won't die, you know. And because they vaccinated a significant proportion of the population, we see less people dying from it now. The benefit outweighs the risk. So there is a vaccine injury compensation scheme that's been set up by the government. If you've had the vaccine and you do believe that, you know, there's some side effects or symptoms that you are experiencing as a result, please speak to your GP. They do want to know about it. There is a scheme for reporting, you know, vaccine-related injury and side effects.
I had no idea of that. That's the absolute first I've ever heard of that.
Yeah. And I think it's because it is a taboo subject. Even now, you know, if I'm being totally honest, you know, there is a fear of talking about those negatives.
I also think there was a point in time where a lot of people felt that there wasn't really much choice in it. And while, okay, there was no one holding you down and forcing you, I think, you know, people were being told, you know, you can't be employed at this job unless you've got, you know, so actually your choice, you were really being sort of put in a corner.
Sorry, I'm just going to add on to that. I remember seeing posts on social media where people are saying, look, if you're a family member and you ain't taking the vaccine, we ain't family no more. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of pressure that was there, peer pressure.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if you call that positive peer pressure, do you know what I mean? So I love the point about personal choice.
People feel like there's a lot more choice in it. I think in my experience, people remember that feeling attached to that period of time where it felt like, okay, I'm at a real crossroads here. Do I lose family, or do I choose myself? Do I choose everyone else, you know?
Anecdotally, from what I'd seen, I think you're right, 100%. That's what turned a lot of people away. The force with which, you know, it was being pushed, it made some people feel a bit suspicious.
Sure. Are there any stats now about, of those who do die from COVID, of those, how many have not had the vaccine?
Yeah, very good question. Look, so this is a really important point. It's a fact to say that the majority of deaths from COVID now are in the vaccinated population. But that is because generally more people are vaccinated than unvaccinated.
I really appreciate the frankness that everybody's had throughout the conversation. You know what, Dr. Wale, to be honest with you, when we were trying to set up the BAME Barbers Network and we were seeking a doctor who could participate in the WhatsApp group, we weren't sure if we'd get someone who'd be kind enough to volunteer their time. And I think your involvement with the Croydon Social P project, social prescribing, it was amazing. And it's been so fantastic for us to be able to partner with a doctor who was not just young in terms of his chronological age, and anything under 50 is young, but also someone who could flex, speak like us, according to tonight, just like us.
Yeah, I've borrowed the clothes.
but really connect to the barbers in a way that was practical, down to earth, and non-intimidating. And I think that's really quite key. And I think on behalf of Off the Record and the BAME Barbers Network and our sponsors, of course, the Croydon CCG, the Asian Resource Centre, the Croydon BME Forum, and Croydon Community Network, we just want to thank you for participating and being here to just offer that professionalism from a scientific standpoint, pathology and all those other big words that you brought in tonight that we've learnt the meaning of, but also to just be frank, open and honest in a genuine and authentic way, you know. And in the same way, Chantel and Anil, we've really appreciated your participation in the podcast this evening. But I guess in terms of closing, there's going to be people listening who are having their struggles, their concerns, and their desire for information and support. And I just ask each of you to say very quickly how, in your office, in the profession that you practice, what is the support that you can offer and how people can access it?
If you've got any questions on the coronavirus or the coronavirus vaccine, I think the best person to speak to is either your GP or you can go to nhs.uk.
So if you would like to just talk out loud, if you're feeling conflicted, a little bit unsure about what to do in terms of the vaccination, I would contact Off the Record via their website, which I believe will be linked in the video link. Yeah. So you could access ongoing support if you feel that would help, which would be, 6+ sessions, either online, face-to-face, telephone or via Zoom. So you can call the support line on the days and times which are included in the caption of this video, and you will speak to a trained counsellor and you'll be able to hopefully get some support as a once-off if that's what you feel is the most appropriate support for you.
Our barbershop is open 9 till 7. You're welcome to come in and speak to any one of the barbers them if you want to come in and speak to them, any one of the barbers them. Book an appointment as well, get a haircut, fix you up, you come out there with a smile. You understand? We got all the information there for you. Just come down.
Best thing that I can say is thank you to our guests who have joined us on the first ever podcast, Trim Grin. I'm hoping that even though you didn't get a trim this evening by joining us, that you might have received something that's of benefit to you, that's provided some level of clarity around the coronavirus and around vaccination, and that you might be a little bit closer to making a clear decision as to what is the best option for you. And on behalf of Off the Record and the BAME Barbers Network, we'd just like to say thank you for joining us, and we hope that you're tuning in for the second edition of our podcast that will have a completely different topic, but will still be relevant. That will have a completely different topic, but will still be relevant to promoting positive well-being and a sense of self-worth as we seek to encourage people to maximize and enjoy the lives that they're living. Thanks.